Hello, hi, good evening everybody. I'm Leslie H. Grace, Virgil, and Alex. And we are EHU Nutrition Society. We're very proud and very pleased to have been able to get Jo to come along and speak to us this evening. Thank you, Jo. Very much appreciated. We are expecting more visitors, so please do. We apologise in advance for any disruptions. So apparently there's some problems in the tunnel, so whether people get through the tunnel in time to watch this. So if there's any disruptions, we do apologise. So a little housekeeping for anyone who's not from campus. There are toilets along the side of reception, if you go straight down there, or there's toilets downstairs. We're not expecting a fire alarm test this evening, but if you do hear the alarm, please make your way straight to the exit. And the meeting point is in the piazza, which is to the right of the lake. Thank you.
Thank you very much for coming today. We're so excited.
Yay! Okay.
So we've got flyers we've given out to everyone. So if you want to follow us on like Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, feel free. And we've also got like a hashtag for the talk on Twitter. You can post questions if you've got questions there. And yeah, for those who don't know, we're the EHU Nutrition Society, as we said earlier. And basically, we organize health-related events on campus, and we've also supported some events like in the past, such as the Stroke Awareness Days, and we had some stores in Freedom News as well. So yeah, if you're interested, just follow us on the social medias for more information. And we also like to say a very, 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 very big thank you to Genevieve for organizing this as well with us, and the refreshment and everything. Thank you very much. And thank you, Joe, for coming today. Okay, I would like to say we might have like a 10 minutes break sometimes in between, but we're not sure yet, so but we'll let you know.
Yeah, then it's just a little introduction about Joe, so if I get anything wrong, you can just correct me. But from what I've come across, Joe is the first NHS specialist in integrative health, which is quite impressive. He's got a PhD in medicine and neuroscience. Yeah, very good as well. With special interest in the body-mind connection. So I'm expecting that brought in today. Yeah.
Yes, boss, I'll do that.
Joe's very active in the community, sharing his knowledge with health professionals, with students, and with the general public to help further their own involvement in their own health, which is very important. And I really appreciate you coming today. So thank you very much, Joe.
My pleasure. Thanks very much to EHU University Nutrition Society. Genevieve, thank you very much indeed. Nice to see you. And it's nice to see everybody, and thanks very much for coming along. Because this is a public talk, really, I've not made it too academic, although sometimes I do come out with words that are sort of a big mouthful. So by all means, just put your hand up and say, Joe, what the hell are you talking about? Or could you say that in another way, please, so that we understand? I don't mind you doing that. I don't know everything about this subject. I know bits and pieces, and I'm always glad to share information and to listen to other people's viewpoints as well. Because even though I call this the mummy's curse, because I get in trouble because of my tongue-in-cheek light-heartedness a lot of the time. But it's never meant to be offensive, you know, so everything that comes up here, it's not meant to be offensive. But I consider this to be probably one of the most important things that we need to look at as a society and globally. You know, it's the most serious thing, and it's grabbed my interest, and I'll explain why as I go along. But as I say, you know, people who do nutrition here might have different ideas. But what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and talk about this from a global, cultural, social, biopsychosocial, financial approach, really, and just try and bring everything in. Because my view is that everything's connected. It's just that we don't see the connections, and often we're obstructed from really what's going on. So that's about it tonight, really. As I say, PhD, I'm a proper scientist. I've got all these letters after my name, but all that really means is that I'm associated, affiliated, or a member of all these different organisations that are basically science organisations. So first and foremost, I'm going to lead this with science, but we have some complementary therapists in, and I taught complementary medicine here for quite a few years as well, so I'm going to bring that sort of stuff in as well. So if you're an academic who's really sort of entrenched in biomedicine, this might make your skin crawl. That's why it's called the mummy's curse. And if you're a complementary therapist who's not so academic, this might make your skin crawl as well. So what I really want to do is try and bring both of those sides in and maybe have a discussion as well. So halfway through, I'm also going to pick somebody. No, I'm going to ask for a volunteer. And I'm going to place them on this chair here and put them through basically the lie detector test, just to show how what goes on between your ears, how it directly impacts upon your heart, and how your heart and your gut are connected. Right, so I'm going to talk about the relationship between emotional disturbance, comfort-seeking behaviours, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and psychopathologies as well. So I'm going to try and link all those together. I'll do my best. If we run out of time, I'll just talk more quickly. Is that okay? The presentation will be accessible to everybody. You can have a copy of it. Is that okay? And you know, I haven't put a bibliography on the back because I didn't have time, to be honest. But just let me show you. These are the Mummy's Curse PDFs that I've used to try and inform this here. Now, because of copyright laws, I can't give people that unless they're the students and they go and access them themselves. Yeah, it's gone funny there. But you know, all the information's here, and there's loads and loads of good stuff. If I just show you one of them, for example, here's one that I've put. If I put biological psychiatry in good, that means it grabbed my attention, you know, because I couldn't be bothered writing the whole title out. So let's just have a look at that. So we'll open that with Acrobat. So, you know, these are the things. This was a commentary on a new series, right, from biological psychiatry. And as I say, I haven't made this up. I've tried to say my words and back it up with some sort of science and stuff like that. But this one was basically about how cortisol and adrenaline conspire together in the womb to actually impact on the way that our genes work. So I'm going to try and talk about things like that. So there's a whole load of stuff there. I'll go back to my PowerPoint. Okay, so this fully smiling face, which isn't really a smile, it may be sort of funny. It's a sort of a halfway between a laugh and a cry, really. And I think that's what we need to be. We need to be sort of open to allow both sides, both hemispheres, to get together and start to cooperate. This will make some sense as I go along. But Epigenetics University they didn't advertise the Mummy's Curse. What they did was they advertised it as this here, right? And Nutrigenomics and Epigenetics in fetal programming, that just means, really, does nutrition and stuff that we ingest, does it impact upon the way the baby develops, you know? And the rider for this was, can mood and food during pregnancy determine the rise or demise of the next generation? Because in my heart, I really, really feel that we haven't got this right at all yet. You know, there may be different bits, of research that's going on at the moment, but I really feel that we need to collaborate in a really, really multidisciplinary way. Because my feeling that is that if we can get this right and help pregnant mums, right, to help them to calm their emotional state as much as possible and eat nutritionally beneficial substances, then we've got more chance. Just put your hands up if you think that the food we eat impacts upon the qualities of the cells we produce. Okay, everybody? There's a hard one now. So that's easy, isn't it, that one? We know about that, the food we eat. Just put your hands up if you think that the mum's emotional state might in some way impact upon the quality of the cells that we produce. See? So I don't need to talk anymore, there's the answer. I just, because that's it. Because in a sense, common sense, which is uncommon sense at the moment, common sense tells us that if we eat nutritious food and we're calm, then we're more likely then to produce better cells that will produce better us. Does that make sense? So there we are, that's basically what this is about. If there was any take-home message, it would be something called mindfulness. Mindfulness. And I'll explain why I'm interested in mindfulness as we go along. But to me, and because of my experience, and I've been in this field a long time, I realise that mindfulness, right, and focusing on emotion is probably the way forward for humanity. That's the way I really feel strongly about it. Because I think we're so caught up in this sort of stressful, rapid pace environment that sometimes we forget our bodies, we forget the sensation of our bodies, and we just get off into this rat race really, and we forget to consider our own health and well-being. Do you think that's reasonable? So I'll show you some techniques as well. And the reason I'm really, really interested in this, in 2009, I went to a conference in London, and it was called the Breath of Life Conference, and all my work now, and my PhD, focused really on the effect of stress directly on different parts of the body. And I've come to realise that the way that we breathe impacts directly on the way that the heart works. And the way that the heart works and the signals that it sends out, right, actually impact upon how our brain waves work. So there's an ECG, EEG coherence. And most of the time, even though we want to change our behaviour, we think we will, we grit our teeth and we say, I'm not going to have any chocolate today. But something impacts upon us and drives our behaviour, and we see a hand going out to then justify why we're taking the chocolate. This happens on January the 2nd. Oh no, January the 2nd we're okay, right? Round about January the 10th, right, our resolve's going. We're exhausted with our gritted teeth, right? And then we start to justify why we actually need that extra carbohydrate, right? And that's basically it. I'm going to try and show you through what's coming up, how sometimes, no matter how much we apply our willpower, something within us drives us and motivates us to be unhealthy. Does that make sense? Okay. So I learned this, and I've put some links on this to help you. But I met this man called Professor Stephen Porges, and he talked about, and not many academics talk about this, he thought that it was love was all we needed, right? I've come to agree with him that love is all we need, but what do we mean by love? And he explains that at different phases of life in our development, we go through different phases of attachment. And what's supposed to happen, and this is according to Maslow, have you heard of Maslow? Okay. Maslow and Carl Rogers, what these developmental psychologists found was that naturally and in the right order, all human beings go through, let's say, 7 stages of human development. But sometimes our emotional body hangs back while our mental body carries on. So Maslow felt particularly, that most of us were sort of trapped in stuff that we didn't get through properly in childhood, So there's a lot of developmental stuff, so I'll explain that as we go on. But if anybody's really interested in what's coming up, I would suggest go and have a look at this, because to me, he was miles ahead of his time. And he talks, this is called the polyvagal theory. And this is really all about the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve, to me, is the most important thing in the body. It's the most important nerve. It's associated with the feminine aspect, and any complementary therapists, apparently now, according to yogi instructors and stuff like that, we're coming into what's called the rise of the sacred feminine now. It's almost like the feminine side of human nature is re-emerging, right, to balance out what's been an over-dominant masculine side. I don't know what most people, they're all nodding. Be good, be nice to me, because I'm on your side here, but okay. So that's Professor Stephen Porges. I spent a long time talking to him while I was down there, and we coincided with our views, and he felt that if we can help people to become aware of how they're breathing and their emotional state, and to be able, by changing their breathing, change their emotion, that changes their decisions then, and they can make much more healthy decisions and improve the quality of their life. And it does become very, very simple. It's hard to do. But here are my qualifications. I'll probably spend half an hour going through these because it makes me feel good. And the PhD in medicine was simply what goes on between your ears, how it impacts upon the rest of your body. So what I did was I put all sorts of subjects through stress and relaxation treatments, and I measured the way their heart was working. That's called heart rate variability analysis. And we could, and it's part of the lie detector test basically. And what was shown was that we could use breathing to change their emotional state to improve the quality of their choices. So really, that's what my PhD was about, and how we can use physiology to change psychology, to change choice, to change quality of life. So it was really what I say, hacking physiology to change psychology, rather than causing more and more willpower to try and keep suppressing and repressing these feelings. So there's all my different sort of qualifications. Just to say, I am a scientist, but I've got this sort of other side of me as well, you know. And this is my field. Is people say to me, what do you do? And I say I'm a consultant in integrative medicine. I'm not a doctor of medicine, but I've done a PhD in medicine. And they say, well, can you explain that in a more simple way? I say, yes, it's psycho-neuro-endocrino-immunohematology. And they say, thanks very much for that. Right? You know, and some people believe that before the psycho bit, so the psycho is the psychology, and the psychology then sends influences or signals then to our nervous system. Our nervous system, depending on the signals that are sent by our psychology, then will send signals down our nervous system to our endocrine glands, of which there are 7 major endocrine glands. Those endocrine glands then secrete various biochemical substances, which then go into the bloodstream. Everybody with me on this? Good. And in the bloodstream, they impact upon stem cells. So what's going on in your head sends signals through your body to actually determine the information that your stem cells get. And as you know, stem cells produce us. You know, so really, are we responsible for the way that we think? And are we responsible for what's coming out the other end? You know, let's have a look. Possibly. I'll be asking questions on that later. Okay, the break. But some people believe that there are many, many hidden or influential forces that are invisible to us, and that all the time that we're being bombarded with information that's causing us below the level of our consciousness to adjust the way that we feel through changing our emotions. You know, and this is really called depth psychology. And in this room now, there will be millions upon millions of invisible signals that will be influencing people possibly across the globe. One will say, for example, darling, I love you. The other one will say, what's for tea? You know, the other one might say, have I got the job? So we've got text messages being sent on electromagnetic carriers across the globe now. And lots of people believe that that's actually happening as well with regard to our body, and that we're actually adjusting ourselves because of this invisible stuff more than we could possibly realise. And that's what I'm going to try and hope to show you today. Any questions so far? Just to say, I taught complementary and alternative medicine here for many years, and you know, this is an all-party parliamentary group paper that's come out last December, and they're basically saying to everybody, you know, can't we all work together because things seem to be falling apart? You know, there's an epidemic of obesity and type 2 diabetes. There's an epidemic of mental health problems. Suicidal ideation and suicidal attempts are increasing across the globe. Can't we all get together on this? Drop our barriers and work together, you know, for the sake of the globe, for the sake of the people, and maybe for the sake of the planet. So I honestly feel that if we can help individuals to make healthier choices, and those individuals get together in groups and make healthier choices, then that may spread in a very positive way. I'm going to try and show you how that might be linked. So what I've tried to do is, this is the human autonomic nervous system, or it's the human autonomic nervous system, which connects various organs in the body. So this is the Western approach. And for my complementary medicine people, right, what I've done is, I've tried to bring in an Eastern approach as well. Does anybody know what that is? Don't be shy. at chakra, yes? It's a chakra, right? And in Eastern philosophy, 3,000 to 5,000 years ago, they understood the concept of the chakra system, and they felt it was an invisible force or invisible system that influenced the way that stem cells worked. So what I've tried to do in this talk is combine both of these approaches, and we see here red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. And what I'm trying to do, right, I'm trying to combine these and say, aren't we just saying the same thing here? But what tends to happen is, in the West, we tend to say, no, that's not possibly right, because those people were ancient and they didn't really have a clue what was going on. I'm just saying, can't we just open up a bit and suggest that maybe there's some good bits there, and maybe there's some good bits here as well. So I'll go further than that, but just to say, if anybody's interested, this is where my interest came, was in the field of subtle energy medicine and vibrational medicine. And if I just show you this bit. If anybody's interested, I'll put another link in there. And there are loads and loads of papers here, and most of these are to do with the new emerging field of quantum health. And if anybody knows anything about quantum mechanics, right, this is physics at a really deep level. It's what's going on in the invisible realms and how that impacts upon everything that happens to people. So some of you are nodding to say that you've heard of this. But there we are. There's a link there. Go and have a look, see what you think, and make your own mind up. So there's my light-hearted approach. Here are some of the players here, you know, who are appearing in this film tonight. Got Catherine here, Alex, Jade, Grace, Joey D. So we're the stars of the show tonight. And the whole thing is, I've called it the mummy's curse, because really, it's all about fear. When we perceive a threat, we go into what's called a fear response. And that's called the fight or flight response. Are you familiar with the fight or flight response? In the fight or flight response, our perception, whether we're consciously aware or unconsciously aware, automatically we will send signals to our body to say, please defend me. It's called technically the defense arousal response. Once that's kicked off, you basically can't think your way out of that one. You've got to sort of, I'll explain later how you can actually stop it from going any further. But that's what it's about. It's about how the stress response impacts upon the way our gut works, and how our gut works is responsible for how we digest foodstuffs and things, and how that is responsible for the cells we create. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to link it all, maybe in a very sort of, not a very good way, but... So there's now considerable evidence that the fetal and early postnatal environment strongly influence the risk of developing both physical and psychological diseases later in life. We've sort of known this, but there's loads and loads of studies now, neuroscience studies and science studies, that are suggesting very, very strongly that what happens in the amniotic fluid, right, and the biochemical constituents of that impact upon the developing fetus. Makes sense, doesn't it? So how can we produce either an elixir of life, if you like, or how can we overcome this toxic soup that might be actually influencing the way cells develop or don't in a healthy way? So there's a strong interconnectivity between genetic predispositions, so the genes come into this, epigenetic processes, so I'm going to explain. Epi means above the genes, so it's really the way genes express themselves. So we have what's called a genotype and a phenotype, and I'll talk more about that. And what can we do nutritionally and emotionally to create the best environment possible? Okay? Good. Just to say, from a physical point of view, it's well known that stressed mums, they can put weight on because they have an increase, they have an increase in carbohydrate intake. They get bigger, but babies get smaller as well. And this can impact upon the later development. It's been shown now that mums who produce low birth weight babies and have been stressed, it can impact upon the later adult life of the person, right? So it can impact upon increases in cardiovascular disease, type 2 diabetes, and even psychological problems as well. So I'm going to try and link all that really. And the concept of fetal programming has also got implications in reproductive medicine as well. So I've mentioned that the epigenome is important. I'm going to try and explain that in a more simple way in a second, but how can we change, using nutrition and stress management, how can we change the epigenome to influence the genome expression to produce a healthier signal that goes to the stem cell to produce a healthier person? Is this making some sort of sense? Is it too complicated, or is it making some sense? That's good. But maybe sometimes we look at, have we had a successful pregnancy? If the baby comes out and is reasonably healthy and the APGAR score is fine, right, and all those sorts of bits and pieces, that's it then, we've done well. But what are the consequences of the programming that went on and the conditioning, the biochemical conditioning when the baby was in the fetus, as a fetus? So maternal diet and stress during pregnancy are each known to influence fetal development and to potentially affect long-term child health. However, diet and stress also influence one another. So this is a study, and it's in those PDFs. What they're saying is there's an interaction between both diet and stress hormones can impact upon nutrient uptake for various reasons. I'm also going to talk about the thing called the microbiome, because apparently if your bacteria aren't correct, right, and there's a stressful response, then you don't get proper nutrient communication between your gut and your brain as well. So there's all sorts of different things that go on there, because increases in cortisol have been shown to reduce the amount of serotonin. Serotonin is often called the happy hormone, right? Do you see how that works? And it's the vagus nerve that communicates between the gut and the brain. So there's this soup going on here. The vagus is sending information up here. That's sending information back down there. And so there's this bi-directional communication that we've not known about until recently. So how can we change what we do to change the way the vagus nerve works to improve the communication between the microbiome, the gut, and the brain, and the choices that we make? That sounded quite reasonable, that. I think I should have taped that. I'll play that back. Is everybody with me? Some aren't, okay. So cortisol plays a key role in the body's response to stress, and may be important for intergenerational transmission of information. I personally feel that the DNA code that gets passed on to us, to me, the DNA code is simply crystallized behavioral information from our ancestors. And I've taught evolutionary psychology for a long time at the University of Liverpool. And what I've begun to realize is that things like arachnophobia, there's people who have really intense fear of spiders. It's thought now that that might have been passed down many, many generations. So the spider looker out for a person, you see what I mean? The person who was the tribe's looker out for spiders, that information's actually come right down the DNA coding and it's popped out in this generation here. And anybody who's got spider phobia, you can say to them, oh, come on now, don't be soft. It's only a spider, you know that one. So if anybody's got any phobias, sometimes saying to you, it's only a spider, or don't be worried about it, right? It's because of the DNA encoding that's being passed down their genetic information line. Maybe true, maybe not, maybe they're studying that for somebody. So there's now considerable evidence that the mother's mood or stress during pregnancy can increase the risk of psychopathology as well. This is not about blame, there's no blame here. Neuroscience now is showing more and more how everything's connected. And I've done loads and loads of interviews with mums, you know, and it's amazing how many times I've found how when children get ill, how the mums blame themselves, right? This is not about blame, and I've spoken to many, many mums about this, right? They feel if their child grows up and gets physical or even psychological problems, they feel as though that they're responsible for this. And it's not about that at all. This is just about how maybe the interconnectedness of it all. We get more information to understand, to improve things for later generations. So, can we in some way help our mums, our pregnant mums, can we help them to produce an elixir of life in the amniotic fluid? That's the fluid sac, the amniotic sac. Can we help them by stress management techniques and correct nutrition to produce the best environment possible. Well, hopefully we'll show some examples of this. And here's a line from a book I read, and I'll explain more about it. Fear, an evil and corroding thread. The fabric of our existence is shot through. This is from Alcoholics Anonymous, and they have a big book. And what they feel is that addictive behaviours are based in emotional immaturity and insecurity, and that it's fear that drives the behaviour. And that's why if you're addicted to anything, whether it be food, sex, gambling, retail therapy, when the impulse comes, why you can't develop enough willpower to actually stop the impulse, because it's driven below the level of your consciousness, and it creates such an emotion, E being energy, and motion being movement. It creates such a strong, powerful impulse that you can't think your way out of it. So I'm going to try and link that as well. Which, in fact, I'm going to try and link everything that's going on in the whole wide world. So, yeah, fear, an evil and corroding thread. And what I feel is that if what I said before holds some truth, then we pass on, it's possible that we pass on the defensive behaviours intergenerationally when there may be no need to be worried about stuff in this generation. Does that make sense? So these are really, really deep signals that are being sent to the developing child. And really it's what lies beneath. Apparently, much of our sensory information, we consciously work out, or can't think of the word, but process. We consciously process apparently about 1/5 of the information, but 4/5 of our information is actually going on below the level of our consciousness. What it's felt now in deep in-depth psychology is it's those sensory inputs and processing that cause our emotional reactions, that cause us to actually make the choices that we make. So there's lots and lots we need to look at, but at a deeper level here. How can you become conscious of the unconscious? I'll explain as we go along. Put your hand up if you see it turning clockwise. Okay. Hands down, anti-clockwise. Okay. So 1/3 of you, right, put your hand up anti-clockwise, and 2/3 of you put your hand up when she was going clockwise. Just put your hands up again. Clockwise is this way, anti-clockwise is that way. Okay? Hands up, anti-clockwise, say clockwise, okay? Down, anti-clockwise, okay? Still again, 2/3 of you are seeing it going clockwise, and 1/3 of you are seeing it going anti-clockwise. How's that happening? When you're seeing the same image, how come, this is a bit of science, isn't it? How come that some of you are seeing it going one way and some of you are seeing it going the other way? Let me just turn up, this is distracting. And see, I know I'm from Seacombe, from Merseyside. I'm not here to cause trouble, but she's not changing. This is a very moot point, this. She is not changing, is she? It's like a pantomime, this, isn't it? Oh, no, she isn't. Right? She's not, tell you she's not, right? Okay, how's it happening scientifically? Someone want to explain? How 2/3 of you are seeing it going clockwise, and 1/3 of you are seeing it going anti-clockwise. Same time, same image.
It's the perception of the image.
It's the perception of the image, indeed. So what's actually happening is, we're all seeing the same image. Those light waves of different frequencies are coming into our eyes, they're hitting our retinas at the back. That light, those photons, right, are impacting upon this retina, which is changing that to an electrical signal. The electrical signal goes down a big cable then called the optic nerve. It goes to what's called the occipital cortex here at the back. And now, depending upon your perception, right, and how you've been brought up, this is so important, it's about perception. If it goes to the right hemisphere, you will see her going clockwise. If it goes to the left hemisphere, you'll see her going anti-clockwise. Okay? What's perception? I know this is me supposed to be talking, but I prefer more of a sort. What is perception? It's the way that we see the world, the way that we see the world. And there's a phrase here, we don't see the world as it is, we see the world as we are. And what that means is, from our birth to now, we will have been conditioned in all sorts of ideas, emotions, attitudes, values that will determine the way we see things and see the world. And this also works with hearing as well. It also works with taste and touch and sight and sound and stuff like that. So our perception, right, is based upon our upbringing. And what it's felt is that most people in the world are blocked in certain areas because it was felt, the Jesuits, give me the child until he is 7 and I will give you the man. And what they meant was that in the first 7 years of life, most of us were conditioned and we didn't change our behaviour then until some sort of a trauma came along where we had to go deep and re-evaluate our choices. You might think, well, what's this got to do with fetal programming and stuff like that? I don't know. I'm just saying what's coming to my mind, really. I will talk about nutrition in a bit, but she's not. Just put your feet on the ground and just relax your shoulders. What you want to do is just listen to my voice and just gently, just soften your eyes and just imagine that you're just breathing in and out. Just focus your breath. Take a big deep breath in. And as you breathe out, just imagine that your eyes are just gently softening. Take a nice big deep breath in. And as you breathe out, just allow your shoulders to gently relax as you sink deeper and deeper into a lovely state of relaxation. And what's supposed to happen now is you may see her start to change from one to the other, yeah? Quite a few of you nodding there. If you just see her going one way, you need to make an appointment with me. I'm very expensive. Right? But what I'm saying is, as you change your breathing and your emotional state, what you see there should start to change. What you're actually doing is you're actually redirecting the signals. You see, more and more doing it now. Has anybody got it to stop? Okay. And what's supposed to happen? And you can use this. It's a great tool, this. Right, it's a psychology tool. But if you go on Google and you just put in the woman that turns every now and then, both ways when you're looking at her, if you just put that into Google, you'll get the GIF file and you can download it there. But the thing about it is, it's a mechanism whereby you can use this as a relaxation technique that brings about hemispheric synchronization. That means that your hemispheres start to work in harmony with one another. And in case I forget to say this, is by using simple techniques like this, you can actually change the way that your heart works. And when you change the way that your heart works, you can change your emotional state. And when you become emotionally calm, you've got more time to make better choices. It's called developing intuition. So does this make some sort of sense? And I'll show you that in the second half. So, the ancient Egyptians, they believed,